If somebody can make you angry or upset you or get you to completely lose control over yourself just by saying the right thing, they have more control over you than you do. And that's a very, very dangerous position to be in. One of the most underrated forms of strength is just simply being difficult to provoke. Not emotionless, not pretending like nothing bothers you, just having enough control over yourself that somebody else doesn't get to choose your behavior. Because we've all experienced it, we've all experienced disrespectful things. Somebody cuts you up in traffic, your partner says or knows the exact thing to say to you to get you to feel annoyed or frustrated. Somebody at work speaks to you badly. This happens every single day, or in all walks of life. Almost immediately, you feel the urge to react, respond, say something back, prove your point, raise your voice, reply with an angry message. But here is the problem. The moment you're reacting automatically, you're no longer really choosing what happens next. They are. They did something, and now your behavior is simply the consequence of theirs. That's not control. And I think a lot of people misunderstand staying calm as weakness. Sometimes it is weakness, granted. Sometimes people avoid confrontation because they're simply afraid. But being fully capable of responding and deliberately deciding that a reaction isn't useful, that's completely different. That's control. That's self-control. Imagine that somebody insults you to your face. There are basically two questions you can ask. How do I make them regret saying this? And the second is, what response actually produces the best outcome for me? Those questions create completely different lives. The first one is emotional. The second one is strategic. And this applies to the much bigger situations than simply arguments. It applies to relationships, work, money, family, and even social media. There are people online whose entire business model depends on, making you angry enough to click. If they can repeatedly control your attention by controlling your emotional state, they've got you. And none of this means you should tolerate disrespect. That's important. Sometimes you absolutely should say something. Sometimes you need to leave the situation. Sometimes you need to establish a boundary. Sometimes there needs to be consequences for behaviors which are put onto you. But a boundary made calmly is often far more powerful than some emotional explosion. Don't speak to me like that again. Then mean it. No screaming, no 10 paragraphs, no performance, just a standard that you have and a consequence. That's very different. That's a very different type of strength to exhibit. And I think the goal isn't to stop feeling emotions, because that's impossible. We're all creatures, we're all human beings, we all feel emotions, and switching off your limbic system and amygdala in the brain is unlikely. That's not the goal anyway. You want to be able to experience emotions in the full spectrum. The goal is to create the little space between, what you feel and what you do. Someone makes you angry, that's fine. You're angry. But now you have to choose. Do I respond? Do I wait? Do I walk away? Do I address it tomorrow? Or do I just ignore it completely? The emotion can be real without becoming the person, making the decision. And the more you practice that, the harder you become to manipulate, the harder you become to get a reaction out of, because eventually people realize they can't just press a button and get a reaction from you anymore. And that's freedom. It's liberating. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, don't immediately ask, what do I want to say? Ask, what outcome do I actually want from this? Then behave accordingly. Because the moment somebody else can control your reactions, they're controlling a part of you, by extension, your life. And I'm sure you don't want other people to control your life. It shouldn't be given away so easily. This is Jake O'Neill Talks, honest commentary on modern life.